Today we're going to talk about the beast inside of the man who stresses everyone out, including himself, but sometimes that oh sweet raw damage is all you really need. The Abomination spot in your lineup is typically probably positions 1 and 2. You can throw him in other positions if you're going to use him more for utility. However, if you plan on transforming him, you are definitely putting him in positions 1 to 2, I think 2 being his best bet. Let's get on to the background now. Beaten, branded, and imprisoned for untold decades, this furtive vagrant hides a terrible secret. The eldritch poison coursing through his veins has given him unspeakable power at a terrible cost. As his form changes, so does his role in combat. This is probably one of the more flavor texts I've read. Usually other ones kind of tell what they do in battle, whether it's, slashing, poisoning, pulling, whatever it is. This one's just kind of all backstory, which is okay. The background's really not made to say what their roles are. They always kind of hint at it because it's, part of the player's past is also how they play, so it usually makes sense. I mean, they do have it right at the end when he does transform. It does change his role in combat. You go for more utility based to raw damage, and luckily the skills are set up that way. I'm going to skip his first skill, which is transform. I'm going to go through the 3 when he's not transformed, and then I'm going to go through the 4 to get to the transformation and what you do when you are transformed. Manacles. As I said, we're going to skip the top one. We're just going to go right into his stun. This is used in positions 2 to 3, somewhat limiting, can hit sides 1, 2, 3, which is a pretty good versatile stun. Now if you look at it, the base accuracy is pretty good at 115 damage modification. Most stuns don't do all damage, so even negative 60% actually isn't too bad. The Abomination's base damage is 11 to 20, therefore you're looking about a rough 4 or 5, then boost that up to about 9 or 10 depending on if you have any damage increased trinkets. The critical modifier, we're going to look at that, I forgot to check that. So 6% is actually a pretty low critical modifier. We'll look at the weapon as well. There you go, 9 speed, which is pretty high. 6% critical, damage 11 to 20. So that's actually a low critical, so getting more critical on the Abomination actually may be something that is very useful. And then we get to the stun. It's actually a weaker stun at 130%. Usually most stuns hover around 140 and your really good ones get boosted up to 150. Therefore, if I think you're going to use the Abomination as a utility the whole time, you might want to put on a stun trinket that gives him that extra 10% so he can quote unquote have a normal stun or at least an average stun chance. I think would be imperative because 130%, even if the enemy has only 60 to 70, that still drops you down to 70-60% for a stun chance, and 60 to 70% stun resistance. It's fairly low. I'd say the average stun resistances of the bigger enemies are 80-90%, and then once you get to your humans and other people, it tends to fall between 50 and 70. Depending on who it is, 50%, you would obviously get away with an 80%, but if you put on a stun trinket, then be 90. It would just be more reliable, and obviously you're not looking to do more damage with this ability, therefore I think increasing the stun chance is your best way to go. I've used Manacles to great effect all the time in his non-utility because if you're really not looking to do DOT damage, the row versatility Manacles is pretty good. Beast Bile. This is a ranged attack sitting at 115 accuracy. It's kind of like the Plague Doctor's Plague Grenades. Negative 90% damage plus 6% crit modifier. Once again, it's only 11%. Blight chance is normal though, 140%, that's average. 5 points is actually pretty good, and it hits rows 2 to 3, and once again this can only be used in rows 2 to 3. Therefore, as I'm saying, your utility-based Abomination is really going to sit between 2 and 3. I think the Abomination's strongest position for transform and non-transform is position 2. Therefore, I'd usually recommend putting your Abomination in position 2. And then this also has a debuff of negative 33% blight resistance at 140% as well. Therefore, this is pretty much a snowball effect. Once you get that one blight off, even if the enemies have higher blight resistances, if they have a lower resist status, you might be able to at least get them on the resist the first turn, and then the second turn you can hit them with a blight. Now once again, it's negative 90% damage, even criticals might only be sitting at probably 4. Once again, this ability is really not going to be doing too much raw damage, but if you get this stacked twice, you are looking at 10 points of damage by the second turn. Therefore, you're looking at probably 15 from that, maybe a couple from that. So you could do between 15 and 20 damage with Beast Bile, which is not bad at all for 2 turns on 2 different targets, sitting 2 and 3, and sometimes 3 is a coveted target spot, therefore you can do actually a decent amount of damage with that, and also get that nice DOT on the second position, which is typically your higher protection based enemies. Therefore you get to chip away the high protection and also melt away the third position. Beast Bile is pretty good, and you're going to make them utility based. You can even consider adding something like Hag's Ladle to increase that blight chance if you so desire. Absolution. Absolution, pretty straightforward. Minus 10% stress, heals 5. This is just good either way. This is obviously good to recover from transforming, and this is also good if he's just been targeted in utility build. This can be used 1 through 4, thus he can be either utility or damage with this. It's pretty good. I still give caution to the wind of putting the Abomination in 1, even though you can use Absolution. Let's say you don't want to transform. You can't use Beast Bile or Manacles, thus you're left using Absolution, and you may not be in a position where that's actually beneficial for you. However, anytime you have an ability that heals yourself and reduces stress, kind of like Solemnity on the Leper, it's just pretty darn good. So that was the utility-based side of the Abomination. Now we're going to get into the other side of the Abomination, the beast within the man. So we're going to go through this whole thing. It looks like a lot, but it's really not too much. So transform. As human self, we're now going to change to mode of beast, where we get 5 additional speed, which means we're sitting at a natural 14 speed already with no buffs, which is phenomenal, plus 30% blight resistance, which is just a nice thing, and then we're going to get that 25% damage. And that 25% damage is really nice because we can negate some of the minus damage Rake is going to do, which we'll see in the next skill. And then we also heal for 10, which is something that you may not have noticed. When you actually transform, you get HP back, therefore you kind of use like an Absolution. Now the thing is, you double the Absolution, but you reverse the stress, because obviously everyone else gets plus 8 stress, which is a decent amount. And then when you change back to human, the only effect is, well, reverse all of those 5 speed, 30 blight, 25% damage. You don't lose 10 HP, but then you do take off 2. So you therefore, pretty much when you transform, it's a 75%, I don't want to say it, it's 75% of the stress will go through. So more imaginative plus 6. Now, if one of your heroes only needs 8 to an affliction, obviously they're not going to get just 6. Keep that in mind, but overall, if you're below 20, you know at the end of the battle, they're all going to get minus 2, so really it's plus 6 per battle if they don't hit an affliction. And to note this at the end, transform can be used between 1 and 4, so once again, you can put him in the first position and not worry about not being able to transform into the beast. Rake. Accuracy 110, damage modifier of negative 50%. Now remember, we do get plus 25% from being in beast mode, so that's more of like negative 25% in a way. Crit modification of plus 1, so that's actually fairly low. We're only looking at about a 7% critical chance, which isn't the greatest. And now when you use that ability, you get plus 25% damage. Therefore, Rake is kind of like this thing where, you know, it's the nice build up. You use it twice, and next thing you know, you're doing about, I believe it should be his natural 11 to 20 without any damage increase items on him. Therefore, hitting 2 guys with 11 to 20 damage by the second turn is pretty good, especially with the accuracy of 110. There is an Abomination strat against the Shambler, which I recently fought and got my face kicked in. I thought I'd better line up for it, but I did not. And I actually had an Abomination in that. Now the problem was I had the Abomination in the 3rd row, and I really couldn't get him to the 2nd or the 1st, so I couldn't utilize Rake soon enough. Thus, I couldn't build up the damage required to get through the summons of the Shambler. But Rake, you can put 2 Abominations, use Rake, and they pretty much always clear through. Then your third person can do something else. Or if you get lucky enough, Rake will one-shot both, and then the other one can just attack as willy-nilly as it wants. It's a pretty good ability, not really good against protection, obviously. Well, protection-based units, obviously, it's just raw damage. It's not going to be piercing or anything, but definitely squishy DPS where anybody can get wrecked by this. Rage. Rage is probably my more favorite, 105 accuracy, so we're sitting right about around normal. Rake had a little more accuracy, no damage negative modification, and plus essentially 12% critical. I'm not sure what that random 0.5 is doing there. But that does put us around 17-18% critical without anything else, which means 1 out of 5 is going to do it. And if you're hitting normal, I believe a critical strike without damage increasing item should do about 30 damage, I think. Maybe a little more, because, oh no, it'd be more, because of the plus 25% damage. Therefore, you'd actually be looking at 25, 37 to 38, I believe, is the normal damage crit, which is pretty darn good for the critical. I don't think you're going to disagree with that at all. Its row versatility is 1 to 2. Once again, 2 shares a commonality with almost all the skills, if not all the skills. I believe it does. Therefore, I think the ideal position for an Abomination is the second position, unless you have a trinket or a set of trinkets that limit him to the first row. If that is not the case, try to put him in the second position. I think that's where he shines. He can hit rows 1, 2, 3 on the enemy lineup. Once again, that third position is often a coveted position to hit because it has that stress damage dealer or a utility person, and trust me, getting a 37 critical will most likely kill that. Even if you don't, you still have some pretty decent damage coming off from the Abomination, and you should be able to follow up the second turn. Slam. Slam's a weird one. So it's melee, it moves you forward 1, accuracy is kind of low at 100, damage modification of negative 25, which is surprising, so you're going to do a natural 11 to 20, then the increase and decrease cancel each other. Only a crit modifier of 5%, knockback of 2, so I guess if you want to send the guy in front back, and also minuses 20 dodge and 6 speed. I think Slam would be a lot better ability if it could, instead of knocking back, it's stunned. Like if you could hit positions 1 to 3 or 1 to 2, I would even settle for 1 or 2. But instead of a knockback of 2, that was a stun of 140%. I think that would be a lot better because its accuracy is fairly low, its critical chance is fairly low. There is a damage negative modification on top of it. And now the debuff is really strong, minus 20 dodge and minus 6 speed. But here's the problem I have with that. It can only hit positions 1 and 2. They usually have the slowest speed and some of the lower dodge. Therefore, decreasing their speed and dodge already, it seems a little excessive, because if they're going 6th or 7th in the lineup, all you've really assured is that they're now going to go 8th, and that's really not a big jump. For minus 6 speed, if you hit the 4th position, you could make them go from 1 to 2 in the order of going, down to possibly 5 to 6. I mean, you could really cut out their chain of initiative with that. However, it's reduced to the front 2. And the only other maybe good thing about this is getting from the 3rd position to the 2nd. Like if you get moved, the party gets shuffled, you at least got an ability to do damage. That's what Slam's there for. The Abomination is one of the, the Abomination's a weird class where he technically has all of his skills always on. So it's not like you're taking the skill off for something else. You're just keeping it on. So if you do get pushed back to the 3rd position, you at least have an ability to push you forward back into your prime time damage zone. We're going to look at some trinkets here. I'm going to separate them. These are a couple of the trinkets. There's many other trinkets you can put on. We're going to talk about a couple of them and the role they would play on the Abomination. I'm not going to go over any stun or blight related trinket. There's the stun amulet, which gives a flat 10%. That would be good for utility. And then, as I said, something like the Hag's Ladle would also give them some more blight chance if you're going that route. If you're going more for the transformed route, I have some trinkets here that I think could assist you at different levels in the game. So I'm going to split them up there, 1 and 2, 3 and 4. I'm going to call these like the late game and these like the medium to late game. So 10% damage plus 3 speed. You do lose that 10% max HP. That's really not a huge issue because when you transform, you heal yourself, which means you don't have to necessarily be dependent on him always getting healed by the healer. And for 3 more speed and 10% more damage, you're going to almost always go first because then you transform, you get additional speed, then you already have this speed. Therefore, you're sitting at probably a speed of the 13 to 16 depending on the levels you're at and all that stuff. So sitting at 16 speed, you're going to go first, you're going to get that extra damage percentage, and once you pair it with this other item I have, the focus ring, you're going to get more accuracy, which Rage kind of suffered from. So it went from, now it's going to go from 1.5 to 1.15, which is a nice accuracy. We're also going to add that 5 crit on top of that 12 essentially. So now we're looking at 17 plus I think the 5 or 6 of the Abomination. Now you're looking at 22 to 23 solid. If you have a Jester, you could bump that up to, in one turn there, 27, then second to 30%. Therefore, you can have about a 0.25% of a chance, well, 25% chance to get a critical. So I think these items complement well. More speed, more accuracy, more damage, more crit. What is there not to like? Now you do get minus 8 dodge and minus 10% health. You do make yourself susceptible susceptible to more HP loss or direct raw attacks, so therefore you are going to probably want a healer in the party, just because if he gets hit once or twice, most likely he's not going to dodge, and once he does get hit, he may not be able to handle that well. These next two items can be used in conjunction with the other two. They're not necessarily, these items have to belong together. These are just going to be your stress reduction. So minus 40% stress inflicted on the party, it's 40%, let's just make that 50. Essentially everyone's only going to take 4 stress, and then minus 2, so you're really only looking at a net gain of 2 to 3 stress on everybody. And then minus 40% on transformation self. Every turn the Abomination takes more stress for staying transformed, therefore this would reduce that by a couple of points each time as well. I would recommend using this if you don't have an Abomination or a Houndmaster in your party and you have no way to AoE heal stress or specifically fire at one person for stress damage. A poor man's restraining padlock, I'd rather name that, is the Book of Sanity, minus his 20% stress on himself. Therefore he could just, kind of pseudo reduce that stress and also any incoming stress he may be targeted with. Book of Sanities and other stress reduction trinkets may be good on other party members, so when he does transform they can take reduced and then also gain that minus 2 back. Those are 4 trinkets I think are pretty decent on them. You can always explore more. You can go more damage oriented trinkets. There's a lot of those. The Madman boxes have a good damage one in there. You can always go the Ancestral Pen. I mean, there's just a couple of good melee ones you can put on. Looking at his skills kind of involve other people reducing stress either on himself or adding it to other people. Here you see Anger Management. He gives them plus 20% stress on himself, which it's kind of weird, the title of that, but whatever. All you other companions get minus 10. I think it's kind of weak for 3 stress. There's other skills out there that reduce stress on everybody for I think 3 to 4. And doesn't add stress to yourself, therefore I'd maybe stay away from this one. Then we get Psych Up. We get plus 25% damage, but this is once again, he gets 25% damage, but it's plus 10 if they're not religious, plus 20 if they are. Just be careful of who is what, but for a time cost of 3 and no religious individuals, it's not too bad actually. My favorite is the Quickening, plus 4 speed, so we go from a speed of 9 to a speed of 13. If you put on the 1 padlock that goes to 16 when you transform, it goes to a natural 21 I believe. I think I did that math right. No one's going before you at 21 speed, and that's without a Jester doing it. If you want to show your Abomination goes first, if you put on the Quickening, trust me, you will be the first one to go. And then we get Eldritch Blood, another time cost of 3, and this just pretty much makes him a tank, minus the fact he gains a lot of stress. Therefore, you may want that Book of Sanity on there if you like Eldritch Blood. If you want those resistances, maybe consider the Fortifying Garlic. That will take away from his damage and accuracy, but it will also save you a time cost of 3 and not worry about 20% stress, because that's pretty significant. One last shout out to a party composition. I think Houndmaster and Jester would be good, obviously for the stress heal, and I think the Jester is slightly better because he can also do Battle Ballad, thus giving him more accuracy and critical, which is something Rake will greatly benefit from because he's already going to have that immense damage stacked behind him, especially if you use the Padlock, which gives him 10% more, and then the Focus Ring, which will probably guarantee at least a critical and 2 to 3 attacks if you're lucky. My final thoughts on my Abomination friend. I used not to like him. I've used him actually a decent amount recently, and I do like his transformed form now that most of my heroes don't have quirks, and I know how to manage stress better. It used to be I didn't really know how to manage stress well, and I also had quirks, and I just found my people getting way too stressed, and I also didn't quite figure out the Abomination yet. I didn't know where he really lacked, or he really excelled. However, Rage hitting the 3rd position is pretty much the only reason why I do add him, because it's a strong 3rd damage position, and it has a high critical chance as well, which means I can essentially remove somebody right away. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe below.